All right. Hey, Chris, can you hear me on the feed? Awesome. Because you hear it coming through. Ah, yes, I will mute me. All right. All right, let me go on mute for a second. I'll do that. Cool. So welcome everybody to the Philly Azure kickoff meeting of the Philly Azure user group or meetup group or whatever we want to call it. I appreciate everybody signing up and coming out. We are also live on Mixer on the Philly Azure channel, so thank you all for joining online. My name is Tim Farrow. I'm joined by many people here to help kick this off, but a special thanks to Chris and Rich for joining and helping us get this off the ground. Is it this one here? Cool. So we're going to run through this because we have great presentations for tonight, as well as a very wonderful sponsor that we want to talk to. Welcome to the group. I just want to see, because I think if we went around and introduced ourselves, that may or may not work with the headset. So I'm thinking I'll just take a quick poll instead, and we will chat afterwards. How many people, by raise of hands, are Azure developers? Wannabe is good enough. All right, that was about 5 for those of you online. How many people are Azure, in the IT pro, the general area? You log in and you do things to help with infrastructure. So a couple. How many of you are in the business area that do things with data and analytics and stuff like that? We got 1, couple, 2. Cool. What else? What am I missing here? Just shout it out and I'll say it online. What else do you do with Azure that I didn't say? Azure architecture. You're right. I totally forgot about that, including myself, which is what I do. Anyone else do anything else? Everybody else just here to learn? Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you. The basic announcements for this group, at least starting tonight, I'll go through it on the next slide, but we do have a wonderful introduction to Azure Cloud Development for Developers and Architects by Rufus Harvey. And then if there's time, I will do a brief presentation on Azure Service Bus and Azure Relay. If not, if there's no time, no big deal. I'll do the same presentation in January, so don't worry about that. And announcements. This is a new group. We're Azure focused. Please, if you have any suggestions, feedback, anything at all, hit me up on the meetup site or tweet the Twitter account, Philly Azure. Those are the easiest ways to get a hold of the group, so we can help do that. We'll take any feedback at all, any suggestions for meeting ideas. If you want to sponsor, if you want to present, anything at all, please let us know. We're happy to hear it. Our next monthly meeting will be on January 9th. The second didn't work out, so it'll be January 9th. The topic will be basically getting up and running with Azure. I think it's like machine learning and data science on a Microsoft platform, and that's going to be with Dave Voiles. He is a Microsoft evangelist out of this office here. And then if there's time, I'll probably do a session. If I didn't do the Service Bus session, I'll do it then. If not, I'll do one on Azure CDN. Just for the format of the meeting, just where I try to do a big topic with the speaker, and then I try to do a secondary topic, which is more just like a small intro, like 15 minutes. There's just a lot in Azure, and I want to try to cover as much as we can. So it's great to have like an hour or main presentation on a topic to dive in, like development. But I think 15 minutes on Service Bus or 15 minutes on how CDN works or something like that is also going to be really helpful. So that's coming up in January. Now I will turn it over to our sponsor, PCM, who has come sponsor the group and paid for the wonderful food we have. So please go ahead. That's up to you. If you want to wear the headset, by all means, if not, no worries.
Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'll put it this way so I can hear everyone. Tim, I appreciate you guys letting us come in. I'll just do in the room, raise of hands. How many of you actually heard of PCM? What we do? None. Wow. If you guys have been in the industry a long time, you remember the PC Mall days? Okay. So after we started in 1987, and we're about a $3 billion organization. That number needs to change on that screen. What we really need is procurement, consulting, and managed services. So think of us as a system integrator, solutions provider that provides the full stack within IT. You can go to the next slide. So this is really our footprint with all the lines of business. And what we can do is provide the product and also professional services, managed services throughout all these vendors. But the main focus here today is our exposure and our best practice within PCM is our Microsoft practice. So you can go to the next slide. So we did close to $850 million with Microsoft last year, and about 47% of that was cloud focused, and will continue to grow over the next few years. So what we do, we have 350 dedicated resources in the Microsoft space to provide anywhere from Azure that we have locally here to Power BI. I mean, you can name it, Surface. So what we do, I'm in sales, but what we do as an organization is work with large companies, which I'm sure you guys are a part of, to understand your focus and your direction in the Microsoft space, and then work with you and certainly take you on that journey throughout all the Microsoft space. So I don't want to get any more because the focus is on you guys, but if there's any questions, I hope you guys enjoy the food. My business card and also a little information about what we do in the Azure space is back there. So please feel free to take. Thanks again, Tim.
Thank, all right. Thank you so much for that. Everything come good there, Chris? Awesome. So we just have a couple of presentations left, and that's all I have on for here. So obviously, we have the main presentation, possibly the one on Service Bus, and then we'll do the wrap up at the end. Please check us out on Twitter. Hit us up for any of that. And with that, we'll start our presentation.
All right. Hello, everyone. As previously introduced, my name is Rufus Harvey, and I'm going to be presenting just a brief introduction to Azure. Just kind of give you some of the various options that are available. Talk a little bit about how to deploy a web app, and then kind of some of the underlying things that are behind when you deploy that application to the cloud. So I know we've got a mixed crowd here, so I'll try not to be too developer focused, but yeah, developers are great. No beef on developers. I'm a developer and architect myself, so. You can see my email there, as well as my Twitter. Twitter is a platform for me for technology and comment on current issues. So be forewarned there. All right. So when you're talking about Azure and how to get your company interested in moving to the cloud, you want to ask why cloud? So kind of some brief points. These should be some of the top things that come to mind when you're considering cloud. Um, so maintenance, maintaining physical machines in a data center. There are use cases for that. But as you start to grow and expand your offerings, being able to offload, having that maintenance is a great benefit. Performance. So this is one of the biggest selling factors I think that I was able to help with the last company that I was with. They had a footprint in AWS. So they had some Elastic Beanstalk, and they had a good deal of S3 integration and that sort of thing. The convincing them to move into the Azure space was the ability to quickly start small and then grow big, and obviously scalability. So when you need to take your application and start ramping that up for many users, that capability is there, and then downtime. Um, Downtime, I think, is an important item to note. Many of the Azure resources are 3 nines, so 99.95%, at least last time I checked when I was putting this together. So keep that in mind if you're putting together an SLA for your customers. Don't be more reliable than your cloud in your contract. Cloud offerings. So as Tim mentioned, there are a lot of different offerings. So we have app services, which include web applications, function applications. So a lot of the buzzwords today include serverless. So like the over in AWS, that's the Lambda functions. Logic apps, those are, I heard somebody mentioning Flow in the pre-meeting conversation. So logic applications, they're a little bit more drag and drop kind of, inputs and outputs and that sort of thing. API applications and mobile applications. Application insights. If you as an application developer, if you take nothing else away from this, take a look at application insights. It's a really, really powerful means for getting automatic collection of errors, trace data, dependency call data with timings, your database calls, page views, etc., from your web application as well as your function applications and other things like that. So it gives you not only does it give you the immediate ability to debug errors and see your error rate, but it also automatically does analysis of your fastest and poorest performing areas. Volume, you can categorize by path of your application, and they really give you a good interface for kind of querying that data and then also sending it for additional analysis and kind of analyzing trends over time. So really take a look at adding application insights. It's something that you can add. We added it to our AWS Elastic Beanstalk sites. With Azure, your inbound traffic, there's no charge. So sending that telemetry data from our Elastic Beanstalk resources over in AWS into application insights it just gave us some, really good information on how those are being used. So definitely check that out. Cosmos DB, as it's called now, the NoSQL uh, uh, database offering. So that has obviously massive scale as they um, promote that as their global scale NoSQL offering. Azure SQL, which is getting more and more. There's more and more parity with the SQL Server, and less difference there, but there still are some differences. Caching, Key Vault. I'm going to kind of go through just a few more categories here. Storage, things, your queues, VMs. So for those, for where you aren't able to take advantage of a platform as a service, you need to put a VM out there. They have application service environment for reliability and redundancy, and for high performance sites, and virtual machine availability sets, VLANs, VPN gateways, and then of course the marketplace. I'm just highlighting a couple here: SendGrid and Couchbase, but they have more and more vendors are integrating with Azure directly, providing you with templates for deploying their offerings. If you're deploying a CMS, you can there are Umbraco templates. There's Orchard, other big vendors as well. So just the breadth of what's available can seem kind of daunting. So those are just kind of some highlights there. Accessing Azure, there's the main entry point, portal.azure.com. There are still a few items that are left over in the manage.windowsazure.com that have not been migrated to portal.azure, but the biggest one there was the the Active Directory, and that has in the last couple of months moved over and gotten fully featured as well. So really, it's just some subscription management and other things like that are still there, but that's going to be going away. PowerShell, so for integrating with your existing DevOps pipeline, if you have a continuous integration environment with Jenkins or TeamCity, and you're looking to integrate and deploy into Azure with your existing solution there, you have all of the capability of PowerShell with all of the Azure RM modules that they provide. Of course, you have the Azure CLI 2.0 now, which is cross-platform, and the Resource Explorer. We'll talk a little bit about that. The Graph API. So let me jump over to just so I have an idea. Not everyone here said they were actively deploying into Azure. Have most people at least dabbled with the Azure portal? How to look at that? Some had a few. Okay. So let me put this. Oh, hang on. Jump this over and let's go full screen here. Hopefully this comes up. All right, this is looking better. All right, so this is a sample of a basic dashboard that you'll see when you come to the Azure portal. On the left here are recently used resources. Typically, you can set up multiple dashboards. So if you need a basic, quick view monitoring dashboard, you can create that here with these different um, sections here. You can add different blades to your dashboard and kind of give yourself a view of the resources that you want. You can share dashboards on your team. So, you set that up. You can make that a shared dashboard that your whole team can utilize. When I'm looking at Azure resources, they group things by resource groups. Makes sense. So when you're looking to here, I'm gonna filter this. When you're looking to work with your Azure resources through the portal, and I do recommend starting with the portal. I did mention there are the PowerShell and the command line utilities that are available, but do start with the portal. Kind of get yourself familiar with what's available. Resource groups contain your all of your resources. So when you're looking to manage them, you'll want to come here to your resource group view and take a look at that. First, I'm going to take a look at when you click on new, since not everyone's familiar with this, you have the full marketplace here as well as the common Azure offerings. Things like the web app. I mentioned the function app. You can create resource groups directly. A SQL database on your server. So these are just some of the common ones that they list here. If you look for some of the so you have some you can find here's a Redis cache if you're looking to set up a Redis cache. So and they do have it categorized. Sometimes it's hard to find particular thing that you're looking for. If you're looking for serverless, that's a function app. So you come in here and here's my function app, and I can create that here and deploy that through this this interface. So I think what I'd like to do is has everyone seen or do we have anyone here that has not seen the kind of the standard web application deployment into Azure, just a new project, deploy to Azure, see where it goes, that kind of thing? Anyone here who's done that? Let's go ahead and do it. All right. Bill says let's do it. So I'm gonna. It's hard to read in the back. Okay, I can understand that for sure. The guy up front says he can read it. Great. Hopefully on your screen. Here, hang on. If you're watching online, you can adjust your own font. Let's see if we can do this here. Ah, yes. So I think if we jump down to this, maybe better. Any better in the back? A little bit. Okay. Let's do one more here. 1280. That's just the wrong format. Apologies online here for the technical switch. All right. Let's see. Okay. Let's hope multi-DPI in Windows 10 here holds up. All right, so in Microsoft Visual Studio, and this is Visual Studio 2017 15.5, which was just released. So that's very exciting. If you work with large projects, it has been optimized to handle those better. So I'm just going to create a .NET Core ASP.NET web application, and I'm going to call this Philly Azure Meetup. And I'm going to create the standard let's keep it there, web application. All right, so if we look at our solution, here we have our standard view. These are the new Razor pages, which was covered in our Philly.net, the other user group meeting recently. So I'm just going to hopefully run this successfully locally, and then we'll deploy. It's building, build succeeded. This is usually pretty seamless. And so there, we have our Philly Azure Meetup site at localhost. So let's quickly put that into the cloud. And so I'm going to come right here and I'm going to say publish. One of the selling features for I had experience with Azure at the last company I was at, and like I said, they had a small AWS footprint. One of the selling points that I had for getting them to consider Azure was how quickly you could get up and running as a Microsoft, in particular, as a Microsoft development shop, how quickly you could get up and running in Azure and how integrated it was with the development tools that you're already using. So there's a very good question online. It says, for those without MSDN, how can you get free Azure credits? I have it, but for those without it, that's a great question, and we are actually going to cover that as well further in the presentation, so that we will come back to that. So here in my Visual Studio 2017, we have this publish capability of being able to push right into a brand new Azure App Service. And you can watch a lot of demos on how to do this, and to walk you through step by step. And it seems that most of them always do a create new, and they create a new resource group, just the randomly generated one. So I'm going to start this process and kind of show you what I'm talking about. So here in this interface, in this dialog here, we have a couple of options. And if you're just starting out with Azure, you're probably just going to click create, and be like, okay, I'm gonna take a B1 a service plan, or maybe I'll create a new one if I don't have one. Resource group, I'm just going to create a new one. What do I call this resource group? I don't really know. My resource group, is that going to work? Sure, that'll work. Okay, so I have my resource group 01. And then a service plan. I'm not, coming in, if you're not an expert on how all the pricing works, you're gonna say, okay, I really don't know what this means, but free sounds good. Maybe I want shared. At S1, one core 1.7, that doesn't sound too bad. That's the default. You know, that's gonna run you that's somewhere around $75 a month. So you know, you'll pick, you'll go do a little, maybe you'll go do a little research and you'll say, okay, I'll start with a B1. That seems like the right entry point for me, and it's going to create this service plan, and I'll go ahead and do this. And this app name, it's giving me this really long app name, and this, you know, with the timestamp in here based on my project name. And here it gives me, this all wasn't always so clear, but it tells me what it's going to create. It's going to create this app service, call it Philly Azure Meetup. The app service is my website. The app service plan, whatever that is, wherever I need that, it's going to create one of those. So I'm going to go ahead and click create. And we're going to talk about uh, how you want to you know, when you're first, you know, just kind of dabbling and learning this, that this is fine. There's nothing wrong with this. But when you start, you know, I mentioned in the kind of the introduction for the talk tonight that we wanted to kind of go beyond just the starting up and kind of understand, well, when I'm planning out my resources, how do I want to organize those, and where do I want to put them? If I have, you know, something more complicated than just this, you know, kind of basically hello world web application, you know, I've got a CDN with this topic coming up. I've got a caching layer. I've got Redis, or I've got a Couchbase cluster, and I need to, you know, put that somewhere. I've got certs, I've got, you know, I've got all these things that I need to deploy, my SQL Server, you know, my NoSQL database. Maybe I'm, you know, I want to use Cosmos DB. I've got some queuing needs. Where do I stick all of those resources? So we'll talk about that a little bit. All right, so it's deployed and it's launching a site here that I'll bring up. So you can see in the URL bar there's that app name, Philly Azure Meetup 2017, and here's my app. It's in the cloud. It's running at Azure Websites or .azurewebsites.net. All Azure websites have HTTPS by default. But I should say they have that option. So you know, if you're just doing some proof of concept, some demos, you want to, you know, show your boss how easy it is to deploy the application to the cloud, you know, that's gives you HTTPS out of the box. Okay, so the thing that really sold the company that I was working for on moving to the cloud, like I mentioned, was the application insights. And of course, I'm not seeing it here. Hang on. All right. So so there's usually add application insights option right here in the project from Visual Studio. I'm not seeing it at the moment, of course. So I'm going to jump back over to the portal, and let's take a look at what was just created, and perhaps go a little bit deeper into the resources that were created. So if we go to, and I stuck this in, hang on. Yes, thank you. My resource group 01. So let's go full screen here. Hopefully that's better. So you'll see two resources here. This is the app service itself, and then the app service plan, right? Because it says the type right there. So I have these two resources. Great. This what are they? So the app service plan is sort of where your application runs, and because of all of the demos and how easy it is to deploy to a new resource group and that sort of thing. I didn't really, in the early days, I didn't really understand service plans. I just knew you had to have one, and there that app services ran on app service plans, and they had different ones, and they costed various amounts, and you could set up auto scaling if you were at a certain level, and triggers for that, all that sort of thing. But but then our costs started to rise, and as any company is wants to do. They want to keep their costs under control. So we had to look at, okay, how are we spending this money each month, and what can we do about how we're spending it? And kind of the biggest thing that we discovered was that app service plans, you can sort of, not really, but you can sort of think of them as like virtual machines. That's sort of, it's roughly analogous. That's the memory and processing horsepower for your site. And the big takeaway there was that they can be shared. So your app service plan, and they should be shared, especially when you're doing development or testing or beta sites and that sort of thing. You want your app service plan to be shared. And if you were like the company I was at, we had we wanted our own kind of the domains and certs on those, and to be able to share the certificate among the apps easily, those needed to be in the same resource group. So so the first thing you want to do when you're deploying and creating resources for your site is actually create a shared resource group for your service plans. And so something something like my resource group app share, let's call it shared app service plan 01. And resource group location, that's important. If you might recall, I mentioned earlier that Ingress is free. Also within Data Center is free. So as far as data flow, you don't want to have your resources spread, at least for your development. If you're not intentionally spreading your resources, you don't want to spread them across Central and South Central and East US 2 and throw one in Japan. Besides latency, you're going to potentially incur some data transmission costs for exiting that data center. So pick a data center that makes sense for you. If you have a lot of customers in a particular area and you want to deploy to that area for your development, you could do that, but you probably want to pick something close to your development location. If your developers are centrally located, you might have development teams and people accessing these from various regions. All right, so I'm going to create this service, this shared app service plan group in East US 2, because that's just kind of where I've been putting all my stuff. All right, and that's usually pretty quick. If you'll notice the little notifications up here, this is something they've really enhanced. That's very handy now. You can see kind of everything you've been doing through the portal. So I'm going to go to, and then you can kind of hide that away. So here I have this empty resource group, and I'm going to add an app service plan. Okay, so here's my app service plan. I'm going to create one. And this is, since I'm coming through the resource group, it's pre-populated, so that's handy. I don't have to remember what I was doing or where I was at. I do want to change this to East US 2. And here we'll start to get a little bit more visibility into the pricing tiers and what you can do in each tier. So if you remembered before, I created a basic one. And so that's $32.74 a month. That's estimated because they do bill per minute, so you can put up a site and take it down. They don't actually start charging you, in my experience, until the next day. So if you have your site up and you're just doing some proof of concept and you take it back down, you're not going to get charged. I'm not a pricing expert or representative, but that's been my experience. So with Basic, you see we have the ability to manually scale 3 instances. And Standard is really the first spot that you can get the auto scaling. So if you need, I said 75, I was thinking of S2. So yeah, Standard is 44 a month. And you can auto scale up to 10 instances. You can base that on CPU or load or both. You can have multiple triggers. And you get the slot deployment, which we'll talk about as well. So I'm going to create this service plan at S1 because that gets more interesting. And I'm going to call this my shared service plan S1 East US 2. And I didn't instantly come up with a naming convention. The first time I created one, this has taken several iterations. So, come up with something that makes sense for you. If your project has a code name, use that in the, here. If you're going to do it per project, do something that makes sense so that you understand where it is and what it is, and then don't change the type from S1 to S2 in the settings, without changing the name. Just create a new service plan. Service plans, I'm creating this service plan. There's no charge for creating the service plan until you put an app service on the service plan. All right, so we have deployment in progress. Great. So I'm going to go back to my shared resource group for my app service plan. Okay, now here I have my app service plan. We get the notification that the deployment succeeded, and I can close that out because I'm already there. I want you to note this here, deployments, 1 succeeded. That's going to be something that we're going to use when we talk about how do I automate this? The portal's great for understanding and learning and kind of exploring and getting some things in place. But if I want repeatability and I want to be able to do this in a automated fashion, I want to start or continue my DevOps capability. We're gonna come back to the deployments here and talk about resource group templates and resource templates in a little bit, hopefully. All right. Okay, so I have a shared service plan, and now I can start deploying my test applications to the service plan. and they're all going to share the resources of this service plan. So really, I don't need another service plan until I saturate the processing and memory footprint uh, of that service plan. And so that's going to help you minimize your cost in the cloud. Um, Cost, I'm focusing a bit on cost because that seems to be a common theme when people are considering cloud. Oh, this is going to like cost a whole lot more. Well, it really doesn't have to, especially when you're starting out. So these are ways to minimize your cost. I'm going to, I mentioned your memory footprint um, and that sort of thing. Let me see if I'm in the 1 second here. I might be jumping ahead in my slides here. And, okay, Azure. Right. So we've covered creating the app services, deploying. So we have a number of options. So I've demonstrated the deploying right from Visual Studio. That's really easy. That gets you into the cloud. That helps you kind of get started, get something out there, and kind of start poking around. Additionally, with deploying, you have um, other options. You have a local Git, so you can create. You can set up your website as a Git repo and um, set that up as a remote on your existing code base and just deploy from Git to that Azure remote Git endpoint. You can have deployment from GitHub, Bitbucket, web deploy. They have the web deploy endpoints if you're using kind of that model for your existing sites. There are also deployment slots. We'll talk about. I'm going to jump back over to the portal and we'll talk about that. And app settings. We talked a bit about app service plan, scaling, and then Kudu. So that is kind of your toolkit. I was just talking about memory footprint and processing capability in your app service plan, and how do you look at that? So I think we've already started on the app service demo, but I'm going to jump back over to that. All right, so here's my here are my app services. Let me go back to the dashboard so we can see how we got there. So here I have the resource groups, app services, and if you're wondering, these items on the left are customizable. So anything that you star here is kind of quick linked from the left. So that's a handy feature. You can move them around. There we go. So that now my SQL Server is below my SQL database. And so let me jump over to the app service. Yes, that's what I want. All right. So if we're looking here on the left and we come down pretty far, I usually pass it. We have this section here and this little, probably hard to see from the back. It's like kind of like a Swiss Army knife type of looking thing. And it gives us an option to launch the tools. I hope that launches here. Yes. And every app service that you deploy has this endpoint. I'm going to go out of full screen. So you can see it's just the same endpoint that was created for us with an SCM in it. So this scm.azurewebsites.net, again, this is access controlled, the same way that your portal access is controlled. No, we don't want to go to Facebook. So here in Kudu, you have, this is kind of peeling off the layers of looking behind the scenes a little bit. And I'm just going to touch on a couple of things. So first is the Process Explorer. So here you can, if you're wondering, well, how do I actually see, what's running and what memory footprint I'm using, and since I don't have IIS anymore, how do I do that? Here, this is Process Explorer. This gives you the ability to see that. Environment tab is also another good information point here that shows you how much space you're using, gives you some command lines for IIS, various connection strings and things that you have here. So that all of the environment settings, path. So you can see there's just a whole bunch of information here. The debug console is also very useful. You can traverse your tree, your site tree. So this is like the file system. Your files are here under www.root. If you remember in our project, we also have a www.root because it's a .NET Core 2.0 app. So we're serving up out of this app, out of this folder here. Kudu here from the advanced tools on the site is a good way to look at that. Couple of other things to note here: application settings. So if you're using PHP or Java, you can set those. Python, platform. If you're looking for 64-bit, you can do that here. Always on. That's another good option that you want to turn on for, especially for testing and beta sites, or if you're giving a demo, keeping your site on and warm. That's where you start with that. ARR affinity, if you're not, this kind of confused me for a while, but if you're not using scaling and you don't need basically sticky sessions, like going to the same machine, you can turn this off, and that really does improve performance, as they indicate there. Remote debugging, another really good selling feature for your development teams. You can turn this on and tell it what version of Visual Studio you're using, and then right from the overview, this gives you like your basic information. You can attach the debugger. There's a option here. It's also in Visual Studio. You can attach the debugger through Visual Studio. So application settings, and let's see. I know I'm kind of running long here. So if we let me quickly, I'm going to change the app service plan. Right. So if you notice, I have no app service plans here. The app service plan that we created is in that shared resource group. The app service plans that are shown here are only ones that are available in the resource group that I originally used to create the app service plan for this site. So already I've done what I didn't want to do in general, is paint myself into a little bit of a deployment corner. Like I said, when you're creating new resources and you're starting to plan that out, You definitely want to start with the resource group and the app service plan. And then when you're deploying from your, whether that's from Visual Studio to get started or, through any of those other options I mentioned, you can pick the existing app service plan, and then any app service plans in that shared group will be available through this portal here. So since I don't have that app service plan here, I'm going to temporarily break my own rule and scale this one up to a standard. And that pricing is loading, and my full screen here. There we go. So I'm going to scale this up. One note on scaling in the cloud. Certain scaling activities are very fast. Certain scaling activities are very, 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 very slow. For example, this scaling action here is already done. Scaling up a service plan, from a basic to a standard, from a standard 1 to a standard 2 or a standard 3, very fast. There's not too much that's going on behind the scenes that has to happen in order for that scaling action to complete. Move over to the Azure SQL side, and if you are scaling up or down, it's a lot slower. So especially if you're scaling down, we're talking about like 18 hours to scale from like a level 3 down to a level 1. So depending on size and of your database, we were working with like a 50 gig database at the time. So consider in your strategies for scaling when you need additional capacity, certain things you want to stand up new resources and switch over to them, and that will work. That will scale, get you that additional capacity in a lot quicker fashion. Okay, so all of that, and we have scaled. All right, so just quickly to cover the scaling out capability, and then we're going to talk about resource templates, and if there are any questions, we can certainly cover those. So I'm going to enable auto scale, and I'm just going to call this no, I'm going to call this standard 01. All right. So here I have some auto scale conditions. So there are each condition can have multiple rules. I can set a minimum. So if I want to always have 3 instances running, I can do that. I want there to be a maximum of 5, and I'm going to set the default to 3. And I'm going to scale based on a metric. So I'm going to add a rule that says anytime my average CPU percentage is over 70 is a little bit rich for my blood, I'm going to go 80. For a period of 10 minutes, I'm going to increase the count by 1. And here's my cooldown. So so here I have just a basic scaling. I'm going to briefly jump over to the JSON tab here, which doesn't have anything yet. I haven't saved it. All right, so my auto scaling is set, and I get a little interface for run history for when it's scaled. You can set up notifications for when a scaling action happens, and there and there are ways to do that centrally so that you know, all of your resources report kind of to the same endpoint. There we go. This is a resource template, and this is kind of we'll start talking about resource templates. We'll cover that for just a few minutes. I do want to try and give you your time, Tim. So, so you can see here we've got kind of the settings for the average. It's greater than 80. I think I can make this bigger for people in the back. So you can see the settings that I put in, 3, 5, and 3. 3, 5, and 3. So that's my scaling. Make sure I covered everything. Yes, scaling. One more thing before we go into fully into resource templates. I mentioned deployment slots, and deployment slots are incredibly useful, especially for either demo sites, production sites. We used it for we didn't use them in our development for our continuous deployment in from our development resources. Deployment slots are fully functional, fully addressable through the AzureWebsites.net URL sites that run in parallel to your current site. So I'm going to create one. I'm going to call it staging. You can copy the configuration if you have additional application settings like connection strings and things that you want to copy over. You can make those configurable per slot. So you know, each clone of your site will could point to a different SQL database, a different you know, a different CDN, for example. All right, so it's created my deployment slot, and you'll see here I have the Azure Meetup staging slot. And if I click on it, you're going to see that it looks very similar to I'm under staging, the main site, which for all intents and purposes it is. It's another app service, and because we're on the same app service plan, you're not getting charged more for having staging slots. So that was something some point of confusion for us early on, is are we getting charged for these deployment slots? And then the beauty of a deployment slot is the ability to deploy you know, in your DevOps pipeline right to the deployment slot, and not interrupt your existing application's usage. So you know, if you have a demo site and you want to get a new version out there, production, you deploy to your deployment slot, and then when you're convinced that you're ready, you know, whatever your gates are for doing that, you get this swap option. And this is all, you can all do this programmatically. We used PowerShell commandlets for automating this to do the swap. It will repoint the IPs to your existing, I think that's how it works, your existing ones. There's some technical stuff that it does there, but basically it's going to ramp down the connections on your production site and ramp them up on your staging site. And you can also include, if you're doing you know, like a IS based you can include it. Azure has the warm-up module, so you can warm your site up, and it will warm up the staging site before doing the swap. So deployment slots, very handy. All right. Yes, you Mhm. Right. So for those online, the question here in the room was all of the slots that you create are using the same resources that the production site or the live site is using, and the answer is yes. You can change the service plan, and you can put the slot on its own service plan. So it's flexible that way. This is also why you want to have, so you could have, this is also why you want to have your shared service plan resource group that you use, because then you can have staging service plans that you can put your staging sites on so that they don't impact production and performance. Right. Good question. All right. So I'm going to go back up to the parent site, or the main site here, and we've touched a little bit on resource templates. I showed you the JSON template for the scaling action or configuration that we took. What I want you to see here is it's also hiding on the left here somewhere. Yes, this automation script. So for say you've set up, you're not ready to move to fully platform as a service. You still need to move some infrastructure things out to the cloud, and you'd like to do that in a repeatable way. You'd like to be able to script that out. You can start in the portal and then download the script for that resource that you've created. And as soon as this loads, you'll see the full template for this Philly Azure Meetup web application. And it's kind of its own thing. So there's definitely some ramping up on learning how these templates work, but the important thing that I want you to take away from this is that they exist and you can customize them. Here are the auto scale settings, the server farms. That's kind of what sits above the app service plan. Different parameters. So there's this meta syntax for creating these templates that that you can learn and use to customize all of this. So here, that's fine. So you have the option, it's not loading right now, for downloading the automation script and adding it to your library. So you can add it to the portal library. But what we found was most useful was downloading them. So right now, I mean, it's sort of interesting having a resource automation script for the website here that I could use to deploy, and these are like all of the settings. But sure, go ahead. We have a question here in the room. No, go for it. Yes. So there's a couple of ways to do that. The question was for the automated creation of resources, you have to create a resource group first. is that done for you? I think was the question, or
Yeah, like I know that like there's things that you're gonna want to do like in order, like create a resource
Mhm.
group and like a database.
Sure, sure.
If you create the database group and it wants the resource group and it doesn't exist yet, there's gonna be like an error. Like as far as like order.
Right. So, and additionally, the question here in the room was pertaining to order, and if I'm creating a database and um, uh, you know, yeah, in my resource group and my application, how do I define that order? So you will have to customize templates based on the order of things. Um, the the best way that we found to do that, especially for things relating to infrastructure, because those were the things that we didn't want to have to configure every time. What I'm showing now is the resource group for a Couchbase cluster. And I don't think we'll have time, but I was going to show how, how to access the cluster um, uh, and how to turn off the virtual machine to save some money there. But you can see here in this resource group, this was deployed using a template, and I don't have the link here, but I'll have to include that link. There are a great number of resource templates available on GitHub that are curated by Microsoft that allow you to do things like deploy a Couchbase cluster and set up a CMS that are outside of the marketplace. So uh, I guess what I'm getting at is when you use one of those templates, everything's deployed in the correct order. So here in this list that I'm showing right now, I've got a virtual machine. I've got public IP addresses, network interfaces, storage accounts. I've got a virtual network and an availability set, as well as a gateway and other public IP addresses. I don't want to have to like manually create these every time I need to add a node to my Couchbase cluster in this example. So if we come over here, I mentioned the deployments, 8 succeeded in this particular resource group. So here we have for everything that you've deployed to your resource group, you have a deployment history. And these are all template based. So if we come down here, these are the parameters that were specified in the template. And these were the things that happened with this template. And I can redeploy and I can view the template. This is again another place to download the template and then customize it. And that's in fact what we did with this Couchbase cluster is we took the deploy a node template and we customized that so that we created an individual um, template for adding another node to our cluster. And we were able to, using the templates, deploy another node to the cluster and rebalance, with like 8 minutes was our, and doing that on-prem with the physical, that was a couple hours. So, that's kind of the power of being able to get into these templates and customize them. Additionally, we customized the overall template because we wanted to use different size VMs and take advantage of some of the more memory optimized VMs that weren't available when the template was originally created, that sort of thing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I do have one other one. Is there
Sure.
a level? Are these item potent? Like if you deploy them, like do they? If it already existed, where you redeploy it, it's not going to change anything. Like if you want to like verify your cluster out there, you just deploy the template again and say, oh, this exists. I don't
No, so basically the template has a an input parameter set that a set of parameters that are specified when you execute um, the template, and these are specifically for deploying new resources. So if you attempt to use the same names, it will error on you. Right. So no, they're not what you said. Yes, item put. Um, they do. They are just JSON, and Visual Studio 2017 has resource template projects with quick start. You know, I want to add a NIC card. Okay, here, let me drag this snippet over and drop it in to my template. So they give you some of that. It's not quite, you know, it does, there is a learning curve to it, but it is just JSON. I think he's going the other way. Sorry, online here, we got a small discussion here on using SQL Server as a source for your JSON templates. I can take 10 minutes. Yep, another question in the room here. Mhm. So I think the question in the room here is that with the command line and having your kind of your master copy of the resource, is there a way of detecting changes between? Mhm. So yes, the question then to finish was, can we determine, you know, if something came in inadvertently through the command line, can we determine what went in and, you know, kind of figure out what went wrong? The answer is yes. All of those deployments that I was showing um, in the resource group those are coming in. Get back to that. Any deployment to a resource group, whether that's through the command line or through the portal or through a PowerShell template, will show up here. So including your failures. So you'll be able to come in and see, okay, for this deployment, we figured out it succeeded, but there was something wrong with it. You can download the template for that deployment and then do your comparison to your gold copy and say, okay, this parameter was wrong. How did that parameter get introduced? Oh, look, we have a problem with this process over here. Sure, another question here. Through the through the template, through the command line, through the portal, like through the GUI here for this resource group, these are all of the things that were deployed. And so yeah, these are this details all of the resources in. Yes.
So I could go back to like deployment 3
Uh-huh.
and get that JSON and go
Uh-huh.
to deployment 8
Uh-huh.
and get that JSON, and
Yes.
it's persistent.
Right. So the question was, I could go to deployment 3 and deployment 8, and I could do a comparison, and the answer is
Get those from
yes.
that point in time.
Right, and the answer is yes, you can do that. I would highly recommend that. So yes, the question was, can this be integrated with Git? And that's kind of the idea, I think, is to kind of create your resource templates, projects, and then version control them so that you don't have to go do this sleuthing here. Theoretically, I mean, you should have that in your source control as a deployable resource. Any other questions? I just had a couple of things as we're wrapping up here. Anything online or? All right. Yes. Okay. Okay, great. Yeah. So the free offer. So I did have some stuff on Application Insights, but you should go check that out. Let me just pull up Application Insights just so you can see the interface. So the hang on here. So in the last 7 days, okay, I don't have this one. Let me switch over. I might not have current data here, but they you see in the interface here they have an overview timeline. If your application's connected, you'll see a live stream. You can set up alerts. The biggest part here is the we didn't set up Application Insights for the new one, but the ability to come in and look at and it groups and links page calls with dependency calls. So check that out if you get a chance. We covered resource templates and the demo. Let's see. So how to get started. So I think this is what you're getting to. So create a free subscription. I think it's 200 now. At least it was before. I updated this slide, but it didn't save. Get the latest tools. So if you're not using Visual Studio 2017, you'll need the Azure SDK. At the time I put this together, it was 2.9.6. But Visual Studio 2017 has the cloud development role. Get the PowerShell modules. The command line 2.0 now. It's cross-platform, and just experiment with it. The with that free subscription, I think you don't even need a credit card. They give you the $200 credit for signing up, and they'll let you keep running something. It was in the last in that $200 for 12 months, and yeah, and you get to like run your Cosmos and your Azure SQL or something for the duration. So really they've really lowered the bar. Yeah, this is oh, okay, yeah. Um, so yeah, sorry that that last slide was the internal uh, PowerPoint email address. So any Microsoft account is what you need. So any additional questions before we wrap up here? I think we're supposed to be vacating the room. So, all right. Well, thank you very much. I hope it was useful, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you all for joining. We're going to start wrapping it up here. Unfortunately, again, we're not going to have time for a service bus. I will do that in January, I promise. Thank you for coming. We will wrap this up. We will also be posting this to, I think, our YouTube channel, which we don't have yet, but we will try to get the recording and post it out there. Please follow us on social media. And thank you all for joining. And we will end the stream there and take any questions as we kind of wrap up and head out.